All right, our next bill for consideration is House File 4373. And members, it's our intention to re-refer this bill to the Judiciary, Finance, and Civil Law Committee for further consideration. Representative Frazier, would you please move House File 4373 before the committee to be re-referred?
That is my motion, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and I believe you also have a DE2 amendment, which means that basically we should just be talking about the DE2 amendment. And so let's move the DE2 amendment before us. Any discussion of the DE2? All right. That's your motion then, to move the DE2 before us. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right. So now we have the bill before us with the DE2 added. Please begin your presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, folks in the audience, thanks for being here as we earn this late hour of the evening. I know we're all probably ready to get home at some point, but there's one more bill after this, but I will be as concise as possible. This bill really is about, we have this phenomenon now that is kind of sweeping across the country where we're seeing groups or individuals supported by groups that have an agenda to remove certain books out of our libraries, public libraries, school libraries. And, you know, I don't have an issue with taking a look at materials and determining whether or not those materials are age appropriate or just inappropriate for our students. What I have concern with and what this bill seeks to address is the particular books based on particular authors, their background, their lived experience, or their political ideology are being targeted. And that is my concern. It kind of goes back to this First Amendment expression that we've talked to with these prior bill presentations. I am concerned about that. And this bill looks to address that. And I will say the conversation started in the interim. The conversation will continue. I don't believe that the bill as it is today with the DE amendment will be the final bill, because I will continue to have conversations with individuals and associations that have a stake in what we're doing here. But I do believe we need to do something to have some uniformity across the state, so it's very clear about what the process will be in terms of how we choose the material that's in our libraries, and then how we take a look to reconsider those materials to determine if they are appropriate or not for our students. So that is what this bill seeks to do. It has to go to judiciary because there is a private right of action in there. Still working on that as well. We want to make sure that it is tailored to address what I'm trying to address here. And what I'm trying to address with the private right of action is to deter outside groups from coming in and funding these attempts to remove, restrict, or ban books based on particular ideology or political affiliation or cultural perspectives. I want to make sure that we have something there as a deterrent for that. And the reason being is because it is a cost. It is a monetary financial cost to our districts, to our libraries, when these requests are made. And in some cases, they are made multiple times. And those have a cost, and they quickly add up to the dollars that are being spent on these. And in some cases, folks bringing these requests, they know that the book may not specifically be inappropriate, but it is something that they don't like, the ideology or the author of the book's political affiliation or cultural or demographic backgrounds. So we want to have a mechanism in there to address that when possible. So that is what the bill seeks to do. I know that we have multiple testifiers, so I will yield and allow the testifiers to state their case.
Great, thank you. First on my list is Carlton Laster, out front, Minnesota, and after that, Kendra Redmond, if you can be ready. Thank you for joining us this evening. Please introduce yourself and begin.
Thank you, and sorry for my attire. I'm just coming from a youth summit all day. Hello, Chair Pryor and committee members. My name is Carlton Laster, and I'm the Director of Policy and Organizing for Out Front Minnesota, the state's largest LGBTQ+ advocacy organization. In this role, I am privileged to advocate and push for policies that benefit Minnesota's LGBTQ+ community and address disparities. Today, I am speaking in favor of House File 4373, the book ban prohibition. As a queer Black man, I can tell you how hard it is to see representation based on my own personal experience. As a writer and poet, I can tell you that I write about the intersections of race, culture, sexuality, and politics, the things that shape who I am and what I do. Reading and writing literature has always provided an escape for me. It allowed me to imagine a better life. It allowed me to communicate my hard feelings and truths to my family and friends, and it allowed me to come out to my family. My writing is aimed to be an entry point for BIPOC peoples and those who are typically disengaged or do not see themselves in poetry. That is why I find challenges to books in Bloomington, Lakeville, Annandale, and other communities in Minnesota so injurious, not only because the BIPOC and LGBTQ communities there, not only to the BIPOC and LGBTQ communities there, but also to the residents at large. When queer and BIPOC students read Audre Lorde, Lorraine Hansberry, Langston Hughes, County Cullen, Nikki Giovanni, James Baldwin, George C. Wolfe, and Jacqueline Woodson, they're able to see themselves fully in our history and text. All students should have that same opportunity and the chance to engage with the complexities of our diverse human experience. When books are removed from libraries, it harms everyone, and it closes opportunities to foster curiosity and healthy conversation. I respectfully ask that the committee votes to approve House File 4373, and I thank Rep. Frazier for their leadership on this initiative.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Kendra Redmond, and after that, Jay Belcito. And if you can, Redmond, if you can identify yourself, your organization, and begin with your testimony.
Good evening. Thank you to the committee and to Chair Pryor for the opportunity to testify. My name is Kendra Redmond, and my pronouns are she, her. I'm a Bloomington resident with 3 kids in Public School District 271. I'm testifying in support of HF 4373. Last fall, a group petitioned our school board to immediately and permanently remove 28 titles from our K-12 public school libraries. Their list contains primarily books featuring or written by members of the LGBTQ+ community and people of color. This set off alarm bells for many parents. Public and school libraries exist to serve the richly diverse communities, not the personal beliefs of some. We have been fighting the petition and its harmful rhetoric for more than 7 months now. Perhaps our most important efforts have been supporting the amazingly courageous students speaking out against the proposed ban at great personal risk and being a voice for those students unable to do so. At public school board listening sessions, we've heard from students and alums that the library was quite literally a lifeline, the first place they saw themselves reflected and realized that they were not alone. We've heard students defend their right to access books with characters who mirrored their identities, situations relevant to their lives, and topics that are difficult but necessary to talk about in their world. We've heard from high school students who responded to the libraries being, and I quote, under siege by forming a large and active Bloomington Freedom to Read club. We've heard middle and elementary school students, some barely old enough to stay home alone, tell the school board that they benefit from reading about characters like themselves. And reading about people who are different can help us better understand each other, they told us. Minnesota communities and our children should not have to fight for access to books. As adults, we must show our students that they matter, that we will protect their safety, inclusion, and education. We must ensure their access to books deemed appropriate by librarians, media content specialists, and educators. They are looking to us to act. I urge you to support this bill and our freedom to read in Minnesota. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Jay Belcito, Gender Justice, and after that, Dr. Terrence Morrow again. If you can identify yourself and begin.
Hi, thanks for having me. My name is Jay Belcito. I'm with Gender Justice. It's a legal and political advocacy organization dedicated to advancing gender equity through the law. I'm here to support Representative Frazier's bill HF 4373, prohibiting book banning in public and school libraries across the country and in Minnesota. There are efforts to ban books that provide accurate lessons about the role of race, gender, and civil rights in America. Most of us believe that students should have the freedom to read books that explain our world and help them to become the best versions of their authentic selves. Books are tools for understanding complex issues and challenging issues, and targeting books with LGBTQ inclusion and with censorship is an attempt to erase trans and LGBTQ people from public life. These efforts promote discrimination and send a harmful message to youth that being LGBTQ is wrong. Reading is a foundational skill, and it's critical to future learning and exercising our democratic freedoms. I'm also here as a parent and a former educator in Minneapolis Public Schools. My oldest just graduated from Patrick Henry on the North Side last year. All of my children go to Minneapolis Public Schools. And this is just it's very urgent that we encourage our children to continue to access these resources and that our children have literature and media that reflects their identities, from their ethnicity to their sexual orientation to their gender orientation. I can attest that unfortunately children are not rushing to the library to check out books. It's actually quite a pull sometimes to try to get them to find books that interest them and get them in the library more. So definitely this is something that can really help encourage a really necessary skill. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for testifying. All right.
Chair Pryor, members of the committee, my name is Terry Marr. I'm Director of Legal and Policy Services for the Minnesota School Boards Association. I did not lose my job after my last testimony. I just want to offer a little guidance and some experience from the MSBA perspective. I would say that library book policy was the #1 request of our 331 school districts throughout the state of Minnesota within the last 2 years. Please help us set up procedures, help us set up approaches. And Representative Frazier and I, we've had chances to talk about that, and I'm grateful for that. I will tell you what our model policy does. It does two things. It talks about selection of books and reconsideration of books. Selection of books, the school board can set up criteria for guiding the selection committee on what books to put in which library. The key word, and thank you, Representative Frazier, is appropriate. Books should be appropriate to the school that they serve. Elementary books and high school books in 2 separate libraries serve 2 different audiences and 2 different levels of appropriateness. So we deal with selection. Then we deal with reconsideration. I would like to reiterate that under our model policy, any parent, anytime, can direct the school library to not allow their child to check out certain books. That is very similar to what we do in Minnesota law for instructional materials. Beyond that, we set up a reconsideration process by which any member of the school community, doesn't have to be in the school, can be a resident, taxpayer, whomever, can request reconsideration of a book. A committee is set up, and the school district can choose what appeals processes it has. With that said, Representative Frazier and I have had a chance to talk. We've also talked with the Minnesota Department of Education, and I've told you that as well, that we're just trying to work in a way that the process is good and that we focus on appropriate books, and we're not put in a position where inappropriate books end up on our school bookshelves. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. All right, and finally, we have from the Department of Education, Legislative Coordinator Megan Ariola. If you can identify yourself and begin with your presentation.
Madam Chair and committee members, my name is Megan Ariola. I'm the Legislative Coordinator at the Minnesota Department of Education. Thank you for allowing me some time to speak to the committee about the value that public and school libraries provide our state and why we believe that protecting access to information is so crucial for this day and age. As we presented to this committee last month, the governor's education policy bill contains language that would ensure access to library materials free from politics. Since we presented the original language in committee, MDE has been engaged with a number of interested parties, including the School Board Association, librarians, and other groups to hear feedback, concerns, and language recommendations. Some prefer the language before us today, some prefer the governor's original language, but overall, we're working toward final language to meet the intent that we all share. The biggest takeaway from these meetings is that there's overwhelming support for protecting Minnesotans' access to information at their public libraries. I'd like to thank Representative Frazier for being a partner in this endeavor, and we're committed to continue these discussions around what final language looks like, hear creative and constructive feedback, and develop the best language that protects the invaluable contributions that our public libraries provide our state. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Having no more testifiers, we will move to member discussion. Representative Keeler, I saw you first.
I was looking at the book guy over there. You want to go and talk about how great books are or all?
Well, I could list my books, but,
It's your chance. Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Representative Frazier, for bringing this. I do want to take just a little bit of time to talk about books and what that really means to people like me, like my kids, like the kids I've worked with. So when I was a liaison, I was a big part of a group that met every summer with middle school kids around mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors, and how what we read really impacts who we are. As an Indigenous queer person, I say in a lot of spaces, like in the classroom, I never saw teachers who look like me, and I have 4 degrees. I definitely never saw who I was or my family structure in any books that I read. And we know that when it comes to literacy, you know, like kids who have more than 20 books in their home growing up tend to go to school for almost 3 years on average longer because they have books. But I have a 7-year-old, and if any of you guys work with kids, like kids have to be engaged in what they're reading. They have to like what they read. Like we read about dinosaurs and dragons, but we also read about people who look like us. When my son read, there's a book that's around Sharice Davis, and it's Sharice's Big Voice, and it talks about being a Native American woman running for the legislature. And when my son read that, the first thing he said was like, "Look, Mom, that's you." Because he could see his family, who he was in a book, and that was new to him. My older son never had that either. The concerning part of what books end up on this list, out of the 100 banned books, one of the top books that's banned is The Absolute True Diary of a Part-Time Indian by Sherman Alexie, which I let my middle schoolers read all the time. It's actually a real-life story about our pain, our honest, true struggle that we go through. It's written from a perspective that's real. It gets banned because it's too graphic, and there's like issues that are real to who we are, and we need to be able to connect with that. We talk a lot about mental health. We talk a lot about life expectancy. We talk a lot about making healthy choices, but when we can't read books that express or show who we are, who our family structures are, who the makeup of who we believe we are from a cultural component, it really hinders our literacy. And I've heard this group specifically talk about how important literacy is and getting all of our kids to levels. If you look at the kids in the breakdown, we've looked at the data enough to show it's kids who look like me and my kids who really struggle with literacy and long-term reading. And so to start banning books that reflect or show this mirror of who we are only impacts our literacy in a negative way long-term. And so it's more than just which books we can read. It's really about showing our next generations that they belong in these spaces, that they can be authors, that they can share stories about the realities of who we are. And I believe that that's really, really, really important. And so thank you for bringing this bill. Thank you for allowing us to have the conversation. Thank you, MDE, for getting all of the stakeholders involved to have honest conversations about this. And I do believe we want to protect the voices of our future generations and making sure that we're visible. I've said it in a lot of spaces that representation really matters, and in our books it does. Your families matter just as much as my families matter, and we deserve to see that across the board. So thank you.
Representative Mueller.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm going to thank you, Representative Frazier. As a teacher for a long, long time, I'm listening to many of the things that I've been hearing, and I taught many of these books. I know what we're talking about. But I want to pivot because I believe that as we're looking at what what we're asking our schools to do and what we as a committee are to do, which is to make sure that our kiddos are learning. I want us to ground this discussion in the fact that 49% of our students can't read at grade level. I want us to ground our discussion that 47% of our third graders cannot read at grade level. And I want us to understand that while we're talking about this, every book is banned for a child that doesn't know how to read. They can't read. It doesn't matter what book you put in front of their face. every book is banned for a kiddo that cannot read. And that's what we should be focusing on right now. That's what we should be doing. We started with the READ Act, and that's great. But that's what we should be focusing on because our schools already tell us they still need time to do that. And so I want us to really think about what our priorities are because I heard from the testifier. Where is my testifier? I keep all their notes. That reading is a foundational skill that protects our future democracy. That was what one of our testifiers said. Gotta know how to read. In the last 10 years, we've had a failing system of what's happening here, and especially in the last 4 years where we've seen where's my notes here, 16% drop of students who are failing proficiency tests. We need to focus our priorities and address the fact that we need to make sure our kiddos know how to read. Focus on the science of reading and really prioritize that and ground ourselves in those things before we take up something like this. Thank you, Representative Frazier. Thank you, Chair Pryor.
Representative Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Quiet bunch today, or this evening. We're all tired, right? I don't know if I could say it much better, Rep. Mueller. Thank you. I loved reading. First of all, I love libraries. I love books. One of my favorite parts of teaching was reading to my kids, my students. I loved it. And one of my favorite places to be is a library. I love libraries and books. But when I was a kid, I did terrible in school. If you saw my grade school grades, not good. C's, D's, not until about 9th grade. But one thing I could do was read, and I think that was my saving grace. And so that's, again, what I want to focus on, as Rep. Mueller said. We have half of our kids in our state that can't read. Doesn't matter if it's an inappropriate or appropriate book, a banned book or an unbanned book. If you can't read it, it's not going to do you any good. You can't enjoy it. You can't learn about your culture. You can't learn about history or just enjoy a great story. So I'm just going to encourage us to focus on literacy skills and get down to these basics that we really need to so we can get our students up to level. Thanks.
I think we'll go to closing comments. Representative Frazier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do appreciate the conversation, although a little muted, unexpectedly so. But I appreciate that, and I will hold to what I said earlier. I will continue to have conversations. So if anybody has any questions, please reach out to me, and we can talk about this as we continue to move this bill. You know, I understand the disparities that we have in this state. You know, kids that look like me fall within those disparities quite frequently when it comes to the educational outcomes, and particularly the reading stats that you just threw out there. But, you know, it doesn't mean that we can't prioritize multiple things at once. We're tasked with doing that every single day that we come in here when we work on multiple bills. I've got bills in almost every setting, every committee within this legislature, and many of them are priorities. I don't say that I will decline to do one because one is more important. At the end of the day, there's an intersection, a cross-section between these priorities that require us to do more than one thing, require us to walk and chew gum at the same time. This is one of those priorities. So we have to, with fidelity, stick to it to ensure that our kids have access to learning materials that will provide them with experiences that will help them as they go out into the world. Well, they're experiencing the world now, actually. Let me take a step back. They're experiencing the world now. And if we don't continue to create opportunities so they can learn about the world, where they are, that was the most important thing for me about having the opportunity to have access to reading materials. It took me on trips around the world in my small bungalow house on the south side of Chicago. Took me away from that place. No matter what was happening outside, I read those books, opened those books, and I was gone from all the negative things for hours on end. That is what we want to ensure that our kids, the next generation, continue to have. That's why this bill is important. That's why reading is fundamental. It's also important that we make sure they can read, but this bill is just as important because it's important that they have access to those materials. So I'll close with that. There's more work to be done, and we'll do that work. We'll keep having the conversations, and I thank you all for the conversation. I'm looking forward to more.
All right, and with that, Representative Frazier renews his motion to re-refer House File 4373 as amended to the Judiciary, Finance, and Civil Law Committee. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
The motion carries, and House File 4373 as amended is on its way. Thank you, Representative Frazier. Thank you for the discussion tonight, members. And I'll do that.